If you're young, say in your early 20s, and looking for work right now, it takes some hustle.
I would stay past 5 p.m. I would do overtime. If there are any employers listening to this right now, I do grant writing, I do communication, I do media, I do social media. I jack of all trades. Whatever you need, I got it. Anything for the grind, guys.
Libin Ahmed applied for more than 100 jobs and struck out. It's tough out there. And that goes double if you're young. Hi, I'm Paul Haverstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Do you remember locking down your first job? Maybe it was flipping burgers. Getting that gig is the thing that gets you started. But what if you can't get on the first rung of the employment ladder? Also today, 1 out of every 3 purchases during the holidays are impulse buys. Stores know we can be tempted, and that's why the retail maze on your way to the checkout can be so tough to resist. Up first, does your sense of right and wrong change if you're at work versus at home? TD just pled guilty to money laundering $670 million. And that wasn't just done by the bank. It was also by the people who work there. TD Bank's slogan down south is America's most convenient bank. That's great, until the U.S. Justice Department hits you with its biggest ever fine for money laundering. Then the jokes kind of write themselves. Most convenient bank for criminals. Even the bank's employees knew it.
A compliance employee asked a colleague why, quote, all the really awful ones bank here, LOL. The colleague replied, quote, because we are convenient.
Merrick Garland isn't laughing out loud. He's the U.S. Attorney General. He just hit TD with a record $3 billion fine for money laundering and kneecapped its expansion in the U.S. TD has been focused on getting bigger there for 20 years. Now, it can't so much as open a new branch in the States. TD failed to monitor customer activity worth more than $18 trillion. A chunk of that money was dirty. And TD's anti-money laundering department just let it happen. It allowed criminals to transfer $670 million through TD accounts.
TD Bank created an environment that allowed financial crime to flourish. By making its services convenient for criminals, it became one.
TD is Canada's second largest bank, a pillar of the financial system. And Canadian banks are supposed to be well-run, risk-averse, upstanding corporate citizens. That reputation doesn't exactly jibe with failing to monitor $18 trillion in transactions. If you can't trust TD Canada Trust, who can you? Clearly, trust has been broken. So how does that breakdown happen?
So there's that appeal, right? And there's that temptation to look, things are going great, the money's flowing through, let's relax the program, because there's that appeal of money, 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 money.
Michelle Gallant is a law professor at the University of Manitoba, where she researches money laundering. The amount of money laundered in the world is thought to be between 3 to 5% of global GDP. In Canada, the Cullen Commission said billions go through the system in British Columbia every year. That's just one province. Money laundering happens in all sorts of ways. Through banks, casinos, real estate deals. Whatever the details, the goal is the same. To make dirty money appear legitimate. But the source of the cash can be anything but harmless. The U.S. Justice Department said $400 million of the money TD laundered was for criminals selling fentanyl.
When we think about white-collar crime, people think about maybe fraud on the securities market, insider trading, and people say, well, who's harmed, right? But when you sort of take it up a notch and you say, well, wait a minute, let's also talk about drugs. And, you know, I lost my 25-year-old son to fentanyl poisoning. Then, like, drugs takes on a whole new dimension.
In Canada, opioids, like fentanyl, are the leading cause of fatal drug overdoses. More than 40,000 people have died this way since 2016. Something Michelle wonders about a lot these days is how some employees can turn a blind eye to stuff like this, and whether they make a connection between the money coming in and something like the opioid crisis.
You could be acting, right? You could be doing something, and somewhere you remember when you were 25 and they talked about money laundering and the fentanyl trade, and yet you've become either so acclimatized, so accustomed. There's this culture of permissiveness that has changed your approach, right? That somehow you're not the same person who, when you weren't employed, when you hadn't been a banker, when you hadn't been a lawyer, when you hadn't been a prosperous accountant for years, and you thought these things were wrong. And maybe it's sort of the banking culture, maybe it's the law culture, maybe it's just the financial culture has somehow changed us.
Can our sense of right and wrong really change when we go to work? From the outside, it seems clear that laundering millions for drug dealers, that's bad. Dirk Matten says when you're on the inside, it may not seem that cut and dried. He's a professor at York University, where he studies corporate social responsibility.
The public reaction then often is there was an inherently evil person at work and did all these atrocious things. When the research suggests that perfectly good people can do perfectly evil things.
Dirk says a bank like TD can end up deep in the world of money laundering for a lot of reasons. Some of them are big. They have to do with the overarching capitalist motivation to make money. Others are much more personal. The pressures we feel as individuals when we're at work. But the groundwork, he says, is laid early, when future bank execs are in business school.
If you go to a finance or strategy course, it's about shareholder value maximization. That's what you do. That's the only good thing a manager does in his profession.
Business schools teach that the mandate of a publicly traded company is to maximize shareholder value. If that's the goal, then money laundering can mean bigger profits. That can be good for the company and also for you and your work friends. So in that light, looking the other way on some financial trickery may not be thought of as morally bad, but instead perhaps as an act of loyalty.
So you do this, I don't know where this money comes from, but it keeps the branch busy, it employs everybody, you take one for the team.
In big companies, employees may only be responsible for one little part of a transaction. Their job can be narrowly focused, so they don't see the whole picture. That kind of corporate structure can make it easy to not know stuff like where the money is coming from.
Bureaucracy is a very big factor here because it just suppresses moral autonomy. You are not supposed to think about right and wrong. Your job is compliance. It's not about individuals finding out what is right and wrong. It's about setting rules and everybody obeys. And morality in bureaucracies is very instrumental. What makes the clockwork run smoothly, that's the good thing. Then you are a good citizen in the company. And so you go along with it. Yeah? And this is very, very powerful.
Something else that's powerful? A company's system of rewards and punishments. Who gets promoted or a pat on the back? How are bonuses handed out? That can all shape behavior.
So I can see the pressure that rewards and incentives put on a branch manager to then say, here's a couple of million, it was 670 million they had under management out of these sources. That's a serious amount of money. If you are running a branch, if you get 100 of that is a game changer for you in status, bonuses, and every other reward you can think of.
Dirk says crime also doesn't always look like it does on TV. If someone walks into a bank, they're well-dressed, they're polite, they're not wearing a t-shirt that says fentanyl dealer, it all looks like business as usual. So taking their money may not feel that wrong.
It is very easy to not perceive this as an ethical issue because in the bank you only see the potential business. You do not see the effects of drug use, the violence, the crimes which happen in another country and far away. The proximity of the unethical sources of this money is just not there. Yeah? It's a victimless crime.
Dirk says none of this is an excuse for a bank like TD laundering $670 million. But he says it does help explain how a bank employee, who may not steal a stick of gum in their personal lives, might turn a blind eye to millions in illegal drug money. He says stopping this, or even slowing it down, won't be easy. What gets rewarded at a company would need to change. And punishments for bad actors would need to have real teeth. Bigger fines. Maybe even criminal charges for executives. More of that, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says, could be coming.
Our criminal investigations into individual employees at every level of TD Bank are active and ongoing. As is the case in all corporate criminal matters, no one involved in TD Bank's illegal conduct will be off limits.
$3 billion is the biggest ever fine for money laundering in the U.S. The question now is, will that punishment be enough to get people thinking twice? Or will criminals keep LOLing all the way to the bank? This is The Cost of Living on your radio, by podcast, and on Sirius Channel 169. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Stop me if this sounds familiar. You're shopping, you've got your list, checked it twice. But before you get to the till, you have to navigate the twists and turns of the retail maze. In a story we first aired a while ago, so this is like a ghost of Christmas past, our producer Jen Keane finds that walk to the checkout is full of shelf after shelf of temptation.
A puzzle sorter. No, seriously, you sort your pieces.
With days to go before Christmas, Tracy Johnson and I are winding our way down the aisle to the checkout at a Calgary HomeSense.
So that's the entrance.
Winners, Canadian Tire, Sephora. Getting to the till in any of these stores takes some time. And that's no accident, according to Ying Zhu. She teaches marketing at the University of British Columbia.
Well, they can make the checkout really quick, allow you to check out right away. Instead, they make this maze to keep you in the store as longer as possible.
And once you're in the maze, there's only one way out.
Cashier number 3, please.
So what do? Ooh, maple sea salt almonds. You shop.
Cheddar cheese kettle corn.
Sometimes people trying to avoid uncomfortableness, like people too close to them, there's strangers around, they don't know where to put their eyes. They're just looking at the shelf and pick up something to make themselves busy.
Zhu says a lot of thought goes into designing these impulse aisles. For one thing, they're stocked with what's known as hedonic products.
Well, when we say hedonic product, it means the products will boost people's excitement, joyfulness, and happiness, and give you a positive mood.
So think chocolate, hand creams, scented candles, things that are just cute.
Like this coffee mug, it's such a beautiful shape. I don't need another coffee mug. I already have 5 at home, but I just want to have this one. Looks nice.
Sean Schmidt teaches retail merchandising at Seneca College in Toronto. He says the perfect impulse buy is inexpensive, $20 or less. But if every third person takes the bait,
that impulse buy can add up, because some of those impulse buys at cost are very economical for companies to buy them. They have very low purchase price points, but the markup on them is huge.
So why do we buy things in the spur of the moment? Well, Sean says it could be FOMO, fear of missing out on a bargain. We might be bored standing in that line. But mostly it's because, well, they don't call it retail therapy for nothing.
Yeah, how to make yourself feel better, right? You're having a down day and you're like, oh, this is a really cute candle, you know, like, oh, and it smells lovely and it makes you feel good for that moment. You forget you've been standing in that line for 10 minutes.
Very few of us shop without picking up something unexpected. According to one American study, nearly 90% of shoppers say they make impulsive purchases.
It's a large number. And I think that large number can also contribute to all the store work so hard to make us buy things we actually don't want to buy.
So if you don't want to buy things you don't want to buy, Zhu has some pro tips. Make a list and stick to it. Don't shop when you're tired or feeling down. Or do what she does and shop with friends.
If any of us pick up something, the other person will ask, do you really need this? Are you really gonna wear it? Do you think this is a rational buy?
That's a good question. But I really think that puzzle sorter is going to come in handy. I really do. For the Cost of Living, I'm Jennifer Keane.
This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. So let's talk jobs, Ellis Cho. Okay, it's maybe not the happiest topic these days. The unemployment rate is up, and that is something that is hitting some people harder than others.
If you're a young person looking for a job, it's really tough out there. According to the latest data, the youth unemployment rate's nearly 14%. More young people between 15 and 24, they're having a hard time finding work. And aside from the pandemic, the rate hasn't been this high at this time of year since 2009.
That was a pretty tough time for the economy. I mean, we were in a recession at that point.
Yeah. The national unemployment rate today is just under 7%. Youth unemployment is twice that.
Let's say you're in your early 20s, you're looking for work. What's that like right now?
Well, I spoke to a number of students, and they tell me it's a real slog. They'll send out dozens of resumes and hear nothing back. Libin Ahmed calls the job search
depressing, frantic, repetitive.
She's 22, lives in Toronto, and has a lot of work experience in the nonprofit sector. She graduated in the spring, but when she was still in school, looking for work was like a full-time job in itself.
Which sucks because you already have like a lot on your plate as like a full-time student. You might have like a part-time job or like a ton of other things to worry about. And on top of that, you have to be worrying about what your future looks like a couple like semesters from now.
Libin tried for everything from hotel concierge to children's party entertainer. She applied to more than 100 jobs in the summer.
And?
Well, she did finally land a job at a bookstore, but it only lasted 2 months. And Tim Lang has been hearing a lot of stories like this. He's the head of YES, Youth Employment Services in Toronto. They help thousands of people get jobs every year. Over the past few months, he's seen a 15% jump in the number of people coming in. And they aren't all students living at home.
So, yeah, a lot of times people 21, 18, 19, 20, are out on their own and trying to make ends meet. And so, again, they're, desperate and some, need to put food on the table. So it's, been tough situations for many.
Okay, well, if you're in this situation, you're out there, you're young, you're looking for work. Why is it so tough out there?
Tim says there are a lot more young people competing for the same jobs. Canada's seen a huge population boom. More than 1 million newcomers came here last year alone, and a lot of them are young.
And even though long term that is helpful, can be helpful to our economy, they start new businesses and create more jobs. In the short term, it's created a very competitive market because a lot of the new Canadians are in that sort of 15 to 29 range. So competition for the scarce jobs is very high.
On top of that, the Temporary Foreign Workers Program filled a lot of entry-level jobs. Kitchen help, counter service, that kind of thing. A couple of years ago, the federal government tripled the amount of low-wage TFWs that some businesses could hire.
And so a lot of youth looking for jobs got knocked out because of that.
And the program was already growing in certain industries. Between 2018 and 2023, the number of kitchen jobs approved for that program went up nearly 5,000%.
such a big jump, right? Like, we know the feds really opened the doors to that program around the pandemic, and they've started to back off TFWs in the last, half year or so, but we're also coming off just historically high levels.
These changes should help, but some business owners say it's not all about the numbers. There's something else going on. I talked to a number of employers for the story, and there seems to be this disconnect between what they're looking for and what young people have to offer.
So what are they looking for?
Well, employers told me young people don't always have the soft skills or work ethic that they need, like showing up on time and looking people in the eye, or being willing to take a shift on a Saturday night. I went to Great West Kenworth, a Calgary truck dealership, to talk to them about this. They sell and fix semi-trailers. They've got 7 locations in Alberta, and all of them train and hire young people.
Morning.
Kat Moswick runs the show here. She says she's always hiring these days because the turnover is higher than it used to be.
So yeah, like, younger workers are switching jobs more often than older workers, right? That's we kind of know that.
Yeah, the research shows that. And the job postings are open longer for her because it's harder to find the right person. These days, she's looking for pretty much one thing.
I don't necessarily want to see your top marks. I don't care. I will hire for attitude 100 times more than I will for skill. And if kids come in with a stupid attitude, you can't fix that.
Okay, I don't doubt that she's having trouble finding the kind of workers that she wants, but at the same time, is this kind of just an older person saying, kids these days?
Well, she's a millennial, and she's not alone. I talked to other employers who told me the same thing. And according to a recent US-UK study, even 40% of Gen Zs say their soft skills are lacking.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got a bunch of young people out there. They're looking for work. They can't find it. They want jobs. On the other, you've got employers like Kat who aren't finding exactly the kind of people that they want to hire. If you are one of these young people, how does this all come out in the wash?
Well, they're just not getting hired. And that means they end up with these gaps in their resume. And Tim Lang says those gaps can set you back in several ways. He says there's a term for it called scarring. If you're a young worker with those gaps in your resume, it can stunt your career growth, damage your confidence, and more.
The youth that have a harder time finding work or remain unemployed, when they look at people 10 years down the road, the youth that had a harder time sometimes earn at lower wages, which really can have an effect the rest of their lives.
If a 22-year-old is out of work for half a year, a recent study shows that it sets their wages back by about 8% the following year. And by the time they hit their 30s, their wage will still be lower than someone who wasn't out of work.
That makes sense. I mean, if you keep starting and restarting in entry-level positions, then you're not moving up. You're not getting promotions. You're not getting a raise, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's even a broader ripple effect. According to TD Economics research, after the last financial crisis, there was a big spike in youth unemployment. And that spike 5 years later, they estimate it cost the Canadian economy billions of dollars.
Okay, so what's happening here? It's not good for the economy. It's clearly not good for the young people who are looking for work. Do we have a sense of how or if this is going to get better?
Well, Tim Lang says it's not all bad news. There are jobs out there, but he says you may need to be less picky.
It's okay to take a job that's not the perfect job that you want. You still gain great experience that can pad your resume and lead to another job, or you actually might enjoy that job. And we've seen people take something in retail, for example, that they thought, well, not really something I wanted to do. And now they're, a district manager managing several stores. And so it's there's always hope, and people have to stay optimistic.
Well, yeah, it's nice to hope, Ellis, for sure. But you know what they say, hope also isn't a plan.
Well, Tim says young people should start early. We're talking 12, 13 years old. Go shovel your neighbor's walk, babysit. Everything counts.
Now, you don't want to be 20 with nothing on your resume.
No, and even with job experience, you still got to hustle. Like Libin Ahmed. She has a job now, but it's temporary. It ends in the spring. So she's getting ready to put herself out there again.
You kind of just have to actually just stick your neck out until it falls off. Me personally, though, I would stay past 5 p.m. I would do overtime. If there are any employers listening to this right now, I do grant writing, I do communication, I do media, I do social media. I jack of all trades. Whatever you need, I got it. Anything for the grind, guys. Anything for the dollar.
You can hear it in her voice. She is hustling.
She is.
Thanks, Els.
You're welcome.
Coming up next week, why Canadians will shell out for French butter. A small block, 250 grams, can go for $20. That's a lot of dough for a little dairy. But some can't get enough.
And all I hear is the smacking. Look up, and there's my cat staring at me with butter all over his face and about half of it gone. And yeah, my cat searches out for this butter. That's how much he loves the butter.
It was the French butter.
It was the French butter. I could put other butter out. He won't touch it. He will go for the French butter. He's got that fancy taste.
That cat just put back like $8 worth of French butter. And his owner's still willing to pay for it. So, why? That's next week. So every now and then we do a show where we try to answer any questions you might have about business or economics. And we have one of those shows coming up. In the past, you've asked everything from why does craft beer come in tall cans to how much of a worry is provincial debt? If anything is keeping you up at night, let us know. We'll take a crack at getting you an answer. Our number is 1-866-550-COST. That's 1-866-550-2678. Or send us an email. costofliving@cbc.ca. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Haversrud. Thanks for listening.